Listen to what Georgia running back Trevor Etienne had to say right after Georgia won the SEC championship and he scored the game-winning touchdown.
I wanted this one bad. Like a lot of these guys been to the SEC championship, the national championship. I've never experienced something like this. I told them about the bowl game we went to in Vegas, and they was looking at me crazy. So I was just like, man, I want this one bad. Like, words can't explain how much I wanted to win this game.
He said that he had never experienced something like this before. He said that in the interview with the Georgia media after the game. He said that in the interview with Holly Rowe on the sideline, or just on the field after the game. He talked about how he had just never been a part of something like this, and that's a big reason why he wanted to transfer and go to Georgia, why he wanted to leave Florida and go to the rival program that is competing for national championships. It's competing for conference titles, competing for these bowl games and semifinals games. Right now, Georgia's putting trophies on the trophy shelf. Florida's not. This video is not about Florida. This is about Trevor Etienne and what I think he's meant to this football team. And look, Kirby Smart backed it up. This is kind of how they do these huge bowl games, these huge conference games in media afterwards. You get to be in a big room, and they've got one player or one coach and then two or three players, right? So Kirby Smart, and then they had Tate Ratledge and Dalen Everett. Dalen Everett was the MVP of the SEC championship, right? The 2 interceptions forced against Quinn Ewers. Someone asked Dalen Everett how he felt, did you ever think you'd be MVP of this game? And he just kind of laughed off and said no. Well, later on, I think it was after Everett and Ratledge had already walked out of the room, Kirby Smart went in and said, hey, look, it's special that Dalen Everett got this award. It's great. He loved that for him. But he really felt that Trevor Etienne was the MVP of that game. Trevor Etienne finished with over 100 total yards, 94 on the ground. I believe it was 27 receiving. He had the 2 touchdowns. He had the long 48-yard run he broke in the third quarter. He had the touchdown on that first drive of the third quarter. I'll get into the details of what he really did in this game, but statistically and just straight up, he made an impact on this football game. Kirby thought that he was the actual MVP of the SEC championship, and he said that Etienne kind of got up, and you hear these stories about players getting up there and speaking in front of the team. It happened a few weeks ago with Carson Beck, and that was a big story, and how he wasn't necessarily completely pleased with the way their season had gone. Well, this time it was Trevor Etienne that was one of the players, and they have all players do this a lot, but he was one of the main ones that got in front of the team and spoke to them and said, hey, look, like I know that some of you guys have won a national championship. I know that some of you guys have been to the SEC championship, done this and that. He's like, I haven't gotten to do that, and I haven't gotten to be part of something like this, and this game matters to me. Those are the things that Etienne said to the team, according to Kirby Smart. And I have to come on here and admit, I was a little bit wrong about Trevor Etienne. I was a little bit wrong. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post talking about what the Georgia running back has meant to this team and how much he helped in the SEC championship game. Transfer from Florida and Trevor Etienne. Link is in the description of this video for our newsletter. Make sure you're checking out the Dawg Post newsletter. I know that there's not a Georgia game for a few weeks. I know there's not even a college football game for a little under 2 weeks now, but we're still going to hammer out the content. We're still going to be doing the same old thing. Nothing's changing on our end in terms of that, so we're still going to be pushing that out every single day, trying to do our best to keep you entertained and keep you informed until Georgia does play either Notre Dame or Indiana in the Sugar Bowl, and they would not be able to do that without its starting running back, Trevor Etienne. You look at the year-long stats, and because of injuries and because of being held out of that game due to the off-the-field issues with the DUI type of arrest, obviously those charges end up being dropped, but he missed that first game against Clemson, right? So Nate Frazier and Branson Robinson and company, they are the running back room for that first game. Etienne makes a big run in his second week against Tennessee Tech, and you say, okay, there's some big playability, but largely Georgia's run game just wasn't super effective this football season, right? You look at it, and I don't even have to bring up the stats. I know this was one of the worst rushing seasons it's had in about 20 years. All right, about 18 years. I think it had been since 2006 where they rushed for this few amount of yards per game. There were games where Georgia rushed for under 100 yards. It just was uncharacteristic of traditional Georgia teams in terms of running the football. And Part of that was, hey, look, the offensive line is getting beat more often than it usually does in these scenarios. And then part of it was, are these running backs just not quite as good? Well, the running backs have also dealt with injuries. Trevor Etienne suffering a rib injury throughout the year. He wasn't able to really be a full go in that game against Ole Miss. He missed a good chunk of November. But in 2 games this year, despite the numbers, despite the lack of efficiency running this Georgia squad had this season, Trevor Etienne came up huge. He had about 100 total yards and 3 touchdowns against Texas the first time, and then he did it again, but for 2 touchdowns in the SEC Championship and scoring the game winner. Look, I am watching back some Orange Bowl clips. I'm watching back some things from last season. I'm watching back more specifically to learn more about Gunnar Stockton and what Georgia's offense is going to look like with him out there. And in turn, something I've witnessed is just how much, eye test-wise, Georgia's run game was better. And statistically, it was better last year with Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards kind of operating as the lead backs. There was more get-off with the line, and there were more explosive runs. Something that Georgia's been fighting for this year is just 10-yard runs, right? 15-yard runs. Those were hard to come by this season. And traditionally, you see a big one broken, whether it had been Kendall Milton, Kenny McIntosh, James Cook, guys like that in the past. But this year that hasn't really happened. I can remember a 40-yard run by Nate Frazier in the first game against Clemson. I can remember about a 30 to 40-yard run by Trevor Etienne against Tennessee Tech. There was a solid 20-something yard run in the Kentucky game. Outside of that, Georgia didn't have a lot of explosive runs throughout the season. It was hard to gain those yards, and that was not the case for Etienne either times against Texas. And what kind of, obviously there's the Alabama game, and that is, but the 2 games outside of that were the biggest for Georgia this season was going out to Austin and playing the Texas Longhorns, and then obviously so far the SEC Championship game with a lot on the line, with a bye on the line. And how much more important is that now to get that bye, knowing that Georgia might not have Carson Beck, right? There's no official word on the timetable for return, but at this point it's not looking good that he will be out there in the Sugar Bowl. That gives Georgia 11 more days, 10 more days, 12 more days to prepare with Gunnar Stockton, right? I think that's huge. I think that you can accomplish a lot in a week. Obviously, you can't accomplish in-game experience and in-game reps in that time, but you can accomplish a lot of game planning. And we've seen that this offense looks different. And maybe Trevor Etienne will be a beneficiary of that. Maybe this Georgia running back room will be a beneficiary. Georgia wasn't able to move the ball on Texas in the first half. Only had a couple of possessions, and then obviously on that last possession, they're trying to score. They're trying to get a Hail Mary situation, and Carson Beck ends up getting hurt. But then in the second half, Gunnar Stockton just being out there brought a different energy to this team. Part of that is truth. The sad truth to that is people just don't like Carson Beck, and that's part of it. And that's the other part of it is it gave the Georgia Bulldog Nation, the fans, the sideline, the players, gave them something to rally behind. Because if you don't rally behind Gunnar Stockton in those moments, it's not going to be as pretty. And if it doesn't feel like the stadium and that the team believes in you, I'm sure that the performance wouldn't be as good. Now, it wasn't a spectacular one. It was good enough to get the job done, and I will break down Gunnar Stockton's performance in a video later this week. But Etienne, man, I mean, this is what they were missing this season. Somebody that can explode, somebody that can be reliable and dependable in these big games. They were missing Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey. Georgia's weaponry, right, for lack of better terms, the offensive weapons just aren't as good as they were before, pretty much all across the board, across the entire board. So having a guy like Trevor Etienne get healthy, get back in there. He's playing hurt. He's not even completely healthy. He's out there playing hurt. Supposedly he was a game-time decision. I don't know if that's just riffraff by the Georgia football program and trying to distract us and trying to deceive, but it worked. If that's the case, it worked, and they got Etienne back out there, and they were able to run the ball, right? Something that they weren't able to do, and they did it twice against this Longhorn team. Maybe that speaks larger to the matchup between these two teams, but outrushing them by a significant margin the first game, holding them to 29 rushing yards, and Etienne himself getting 80-something, and then in the second game, Etienne himself gets 94, and Texas only gets 31. It was a good feat, and he was a big, big part of why they were able to win that football game. And clearly, not having him healthy and not having him out there for a lot of the season has been a part of why Georgia hasn't been as good as it could be. All right, Ryan Curley from Dawg Post talking about Trevor Etienne. Thank you for watching.